Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a problem we've talked about before. Problems. It's always problems, isn't it? But actually, it's significant in the world of classical music and those of us who try to promote it. And it's this. Why is it so difficult to get people who avowedly love classical music to listen to things that are even marginally outside the canon, the three Bs, the big names? I mean, part of the answer, of course, is that it takes time, and I get that. People are busy, and they just want the best, or what the perception is of the best. I mean, is the best the best? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. But what always has concerned me, as we talk about all these other wonderful composers and the tons of music and the fact that the recording industry, here it is, the recording industry, has produced so much more besides just the three Bs, the basic canon of classical works. And they've never been able to sell them particularly. And that's a fact. People like to say that the thing that they love must also be something that's popular. Like I've said many times here, Bruckner doesn't sell. And everyone says, oh, yes, it does. Yes, you go to Germany. Trust me, folks, Bruckner doesn't sell. I had friends who are really industry insiders. One of them was this wonderful man I've mentioned before. His name was Remy Farkas. He was a major macher at Decca. He would tell me with pride that he was responsible for firing John Coleshaw, which is like, if you know your recording producers, John Coleshaw was one of the biggies, and he had one of the biggest egos, and he wrote about himself. Anyway, the bottom line is that Remy and his friend Pierre Bourdain, who was a major guy at Sony, or when it was Columbia, owned a little record shop on Lexington Avenue called Orpheus Remarkable Recordings. It was a hole in the wall, and they had very, very limited stock. And I was friendly with these guys. I used to go and they would get new releases, but in very small quantities. And what they basically had was the main 3B type stuff with major artists like Carillon and people like that, because here was a newsflash. Bernstein didn't sell either, particularly. I mean, everybody has their market, right? So they were doing quite well, in the face of these super mega stores like Tower and all those, Virgin and the reason was because they sold the stuff that sold, and they knew it sold. And he said to me, look, these people can make whatever they want to make, as much as they want to make, for whatever reason they want to make it. But the stuff that sells is Carillon and Beethoven and Brahms, and that is what sells. And, and Remy was a huge opera guy. So, I mean, it was his, the Italian operas. Wagner sold. Italian operas, Puccini, Verdi, they sold. It was really, he was also Giuseppe Di Stefano's brother-in-law. That may have something to do with a certain bias. And he loved zarzuelas. So he had all this, Spanish zarzuela stuff. And, you can sell. So there are two aspects to this. Let me put it to you this way. There are the things that sell naturally because they fulfill people's expectations of what classical music is supposed to be. Then there are the things that you can sell to them once they trust you. Once, you've got them and you know what they like and they know what else they might like, and they'll take a risk. But the bottom line with the classical music universe is that classical music people generally are risk averse. They do not want to take a risk. Why don't they want to take a risk? Well, like I said, they don't want to take a risk because taking a risk involves time as much as money. I mean, it's a lethal combination. You've got to spend money on the disc, and you've got to sit there and listen to it. That's less of an issue now with streaming services, of course. There's all kinds of stuff out there that people can stream. And every so often you find, social media, something goes wild and some weird or obscure thing will get 30 trillion hits. But, one of the reasons that something gets 30 trillion hits, you'll find it's not going to be like a Bach's symphony that's getting 30 trillion hits. It's going to be the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto. It's going to be a Beethoven symphony. It's going to be something in the standard repertoire, because the people who are doing the hitting, they don't give a damn who's performing. They just want to know the name. It's name recognition. And so in putting together this whole channel and doing these things, I'm always trying to strike a balance between talking about new repertoire or interesting repertoire and talking about more recordings of the same old, same old. And you've noticed this. I know some of you who are hardcore new repertoire people want me to do more of that. Others who are interested in particular artists or just, the three Bs want to have the latest recording of the B minor Mass by so-and-so. And how does it compare to the other 30 million recordings of the B minor Mass? These are all legitimate desires, but the overwhelming majority is going to be for the standard stuff. And that pisses me off. It really does, because there's so much other stuff, and it's not better. The standard stuff. It's great. It's incredibly great. I remember very vividly. I had a period in my listening when I absolutely forswore the basic canon, and I just listened to all kinds of obscure things, and on the theory that that music was just as good as the more popular stuff, and it was just unfair that it was being ignored or not being given the credit that it deserved. Well, and then I went back to the standard stuff, and I went, oh, this is really great. Yeah, it is, because that's the problem. The problem is this. The problem is that the basic canon, the 3Bs, is great. It's as good as it gets. Does it mean that the other stuff is worse? No, not necessarily. Some of it is, but some of that is also as good as it gets. It's not that you're comparing good music to bad music. It's that you're comparing known great music, and a lot of it, to unknown great music, and a lot of it. And that doesn't give the unknown stuff much of a chance of breaking through the barrier. It really doesn't. It's very, very hard. And maybe it's good that it's very hard. I don't know. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we should have certain things that we all agree are great and cherish those, especially when there's so much of it. So I can't say that I'm upset for that reason, but it does bother me, this profound conservatism in the classical music universe, because the people who like the standard stuff have all of the ingredients that they need to enjoy the non-standard stuff. It's not that different. It really isn't, most of it. If it's avant-garde wild stuff, I know, but you know what I mean. A 19th century symphony is going to sound like a 19th century symphony. And there are some great ones that are not by Brahms or Tchaikovsky or Dvorak. There's some great ones by Dvorak that we don't listen to, and Tchaikovsky. There really are, and no one pays attention to them. It's just one of those things. There's sometimes I just feel that I'm like banging my head against a wall, and I know a lot of you guys agree, but I don't think there's anything we could do about it. What we have to do is work within the system. We have to accept what is, and try and gradually enlarge the spectrum and say, look, it's fine if you just like the 3Bs. It's fine if you just want the real certified masterpieces that just have the weight of historical opinion behind them rather than any particular musical facts. And we're going to gradually ask that you try something else instead, once in a while. And that's what we're going to have to live with, because that's just the reality, I think. I'm curious to get your opinion on this. I really am, because it's something that, it's a question that has no answer, really. But the changing landscape of classical music, of classical music consumption, that is the existence now of all these streaming services where you can get all that stuff, all the weird stuff, for free, or for the same price that you paid to get all the standard stuff. Maybe that'll change things a little bit. What's interesting is that it doesn't seem to, at least not that I've noticed particularly. You may have some anecdotal evidence to the contrary. So let me know. And keep on listening to everything. Of course we have to. Thank you for joining me, and take care.